Hello everyone, and welcome to the insert lecture. So in this lecture, we're going to learn how to use the insert command, and then we're going to see some examples. So when you first create a new table, it doesn't have any data inside of it yet. So we've seen the create table command, but after we create the table, the rows are still empty. So we've defined the schema that we need as far as the data types and the columns, but we don't actually have rows of data in it. So the first thing you often do is insert new rows into the table. And SQL provides the insert statement that allows you to insert one or more rows into a table at a time. So the actual syntax is pretty straightforward, and you can see it here at the bottom. You have the insert into table, then some columns, and then you have values. So first you specify the name of the table that you want to insert a new row after the insert into clause. So you always start off with insert into, then the name of the table you want to insert a new row, and then you follow that by a comma separated column list. So you start with some parentheses, and then you have the name of the columns. Second, you list a comma separated value list after the values clause. So you're going to say insert into table, a comma separated column list, then you'll say values, and then the value list must be in the same order as the columns list specified after the table name. So for example, in the example here below, we have column 1, column 2. So then value 1 should be expected to be inserted into column 1, and then value 2 should be expected to be inserted into column 2. So the order there needs to match, as you would probably expect. To add multiple rows into a table at a time, you use the following syntax. You basically have a list of lists in those values. So you say insert into table, the list of columns, then you say values, and then by parentheses you have a single list, then comma, another set of parentheses for another list of values, and so on. Okay, so to insert data that comes from another table, you can use the insert into select statement as follows. You can say something like this. You can say insert into table, and then you'll say select certain amount of columns from another table, and then you can also add some where condition. So we'll see an example of how to actually do this later on in pgadmin and the SQL editor. So it'll probably be more clear when we actually see a written example of this. But just keep in mind that you're allowed to insert data directly from another table. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and go to pgadmin to explore the insert statement. I'm going to go ahead and open up pgadmin and open up a SQL editor. All right, so here I am at pgadmin. Let's go ahead and review how to create a table in order to create a table for the insert into demonstration. So let's go and review how to create a table. We're going to say create table. Let's call this table link. Keep an open parentheses. And now we're going to have the column name, the type, and then the constraint. So it's going to be, this will be the primary key, will be some ID. So we have the primary key, we'll put a comma in there to separate that column. We'll also have a URL, and we'll say it's a variable character, 255 characters. We'll call it not null, put a comma in there. We'll make another column called name, have it be a variable character. We'll pass in 255, also call it not null. Have another column called description. Let's have it be variable character, 255 again, 225, 255, doesn't really matter. We'll have no constraints on that one. And then we'll have one more called rel, maybe that's a relationship or something, and then we'll have that be a variable character. Just make that 50. Again, no actual constraints on that. So we're going to create this table called link. It's going to have a couple columns. It'll have an ID column as the primary key, then a URL column, a name column, a description column, and an rel column. So let's go ahead and run this, make sure it works out. All right, so it looks like we created a table. Let's go ahead and make sure by saying select everything from link. And it looks like we're good here. So we have the ID, the URL, name, description, and this rel column, or rel column. So let's go ahead and explore how to actually use insert into. So the syntax, again, looks like this. I'm going to say insert into the name of my table, link, and then the name of the columns I actually want to insert into. So in this case, I'll insert a URL and a name. And then I'm going to say values, and then I'm going to pass in a list of values here. So we're going to say something like www for the URL .google.com, so just a string there. It's a variable character. And let's go ahead, and then the name of that is just going to be Google. Finish that list, put a semicolon at the end of it, go ahead and run it, and looks like it worked out. And keep in mind, just a reminder, to insert a character data type, you must enclose it in those single quotes. If you're doing a number data type, you don't need to do that. You can just use a plain number. If you omit any columns that accepts a null value in the insert statement, the column will take its default value as null. And you can actually specify what default values it should go to if you don't want null to be the automatic default value. Let's go ahead and make sure this worked out. Let's go ahead and say select everything, all columns from link again, or all rows I should say. All columns and rows. So select everything from link. If I run this, looks like we're good here. We have an ID integer, a URL, and the name. So remember that ID integer was a serial data type, so it automatically put a 1 in there. And if we do another one or do another insert, it'll automatically put in a 2. So it basically automatically increments that value. Okay, so that was a very basic example of insert into. Again, we just had to say insert into the table, pass in the list of columns, and then say values and pass in the list of values. Let's go ahead and do this one more time just to make sure we really understand it. So I'm going to say again, insert into link table. We'll put in a URL and a name again into those columns. Then we're going to say values, and then we're going to pass in a list of values. So let's put in another website. Let's just go ahead and say yahoo.com, and then we'll call this name Yahoo. Semicolon to end that. Let's go ahead and run that. Looks like it worked out. It says one row affected. And let's go ahead and say select all columns from link, make sure it works. And there it is again. And note that that ID, which is a serial data type, automatically put in a 2 value. It increments off of 1 from the ID. So now we have the URL and the name. So that's looking good. And we have null values here since it defaults to null if we don't actually assign a value to a column for that particular row. Now let's take a quick look at how we can insert multiple rows at a time. We can say something like this. We'll say insert into link. Again, let's just do the URL and name column. Values. And in this case, we're going to insert multiple values, or multiple rows, I should say. So let's go ahead and say www.bing.com. And we'll describe that as Bing, comma, let's go ahead and put in another list of values. Let's go ahead and say www.amazon.com, and we'll call that name Amazon. Semicolon there. Let's go ahead and run that. Looks like it affected 2 rows. And let's again confirm that it worked by saying select everything from link. And if we scroll down here at the bottom, we have Google, Yahoo, and Bing, Amazon all in there. So that worked out great. Now to end this lecture, let's go ahead and see an example of inserting data from another table. So in order to do this, we'll have to create another table that is like the link table. And it's actually really easy to do this in PostgreSQL. What we can do is we can say create table, and the name of the table, we'll say this is link copy. And then what I could do is again put in all the column values, the data types, the constraints, or if I want it to be the same structure as another table, there's actually a really nice shortcut for this. And it's going to be, you say like, and then the other table you want to basically copy the same structure from. So I'm going to say create table, link copy, that's the name of the table we're creating. And if you pass in parentheses like and another table name, it will automatically create the table with the same structure as the table you say like. So if I go ahead and run this, the query worked out. So then let's select everything from the link copy table. Select everything from link copy. And you notice here we have the exact same structure as the link table. We don't actually copy any of the data from it, but we do copy that schema of the structure of that link table. So again, that's just a really easy way of doing it. All we had to do was say create table, some new table name, and then you say like, in parentheses, you put in some old table name. And that's the basic command for essentially just quickly copying the same schema and structure of an older table into a new table. Really convenient function in PostgreSQL. So I would suggest using that if you're planning on copying tables a lot. Makes your life a lot easier. All right, so now let's go over how to insert rows from another table. So we'll go ahead and do this. We're going to say insert into, and let's go ahead and insert into the link copy table. And now we're going to have a select statement. So we'll say select all the columns from link, and let's go ahead and add a where statement or where clause. So we'll say where, and let's go ahead and specify a particular row to put in. So we know like we have Bing in there, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll say where name equals, and we'll pass in Bing, semicolon. Let's go ahead and run this, make sure it worked. Looks like it worked out. We affected one row. So let's go ahead and delete this, and we'll say select asterisk from, and we'll say link underscore copy. And if this all worked out, we should have copied Bing and Bing.com. Notice that the ID integer here, though, got copied as well. So even though we have 1 as that index, the ID integer was also copied from the original link table. So keep that in mind. You're going to copy that information as well, even if it's a serial data type. All right, so that was basically it as far as inserting into a table and inserting data from another table. So let's go over real quick everything that we just did. So we said insert into. So for a basic insert into example, all you had to say was insert into, and then you had to say the name of the table you wanted to insert into. So again, to do that, we could have just said insert into link. Then you pass in the list of columns you want to insert into, such as URL or name. You use keyword values, and then you can pass in parentheses, a list of values that lines up with the column names. So I'm going to go ahead and just put in a couple examples here. So www, let's just say a.com, and we'll have that be titled A. I actually don't know what these websites are. And then let's go ahead and show you another example. If I want to insert multiple rows, we can do b.com and pass in B there. Semicolon to go ahead and close that off. If you run that, that's fine. So that's how you insert values or multiple values into a table. And again, a quick review of how to insert data from one table into another. You just say insert into, and instead of doing this, you can say the table you want to insert into, and then you have a select statement. So you'll say, let's go ahead and just select everything from link. Not even a where statement there, so we're going to say insert into the link copy, select everything from link. If I run that, that should have affected all the rows in link copy. So if we go ahead and check that out, we'll say select everything from link underscore copy, run that. And so now I've fully copied in again. And I notice I'm going to have repeats here because I basically ran some of these twice. But here's that a.com and that b.com value. Okay, that's really all there is as far as using insert into. In the field, it's probably unlikely that you're inserting individual rows by hand, but you never know. More likely than not, you're going to be using this knowledge of how to insert into a PostgreSQL when you're thinking about database design in some sort of application, like a web app or something. And it really depends on what your situation is, what your application is, and what you're trying to get out of your database to how you're actually going to use these commands. So in real life, it's probably unlikely that you're manually inputting or inserting individual rows, but it is good to understand these basic syntax. That way, if you want to make some sort of automated call, then you can actually build off your knowledge of this syntax to put it in some code, like maybe a Python script or something. Okay, so that's it for this lecture. Again, go ahead and rewatch it and review in case anything was unclear of how to insert into just individual rows into a table, or many rows and values into a table, or from another table. Okay, that's it for the lecture. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you at the next one.